Welcome back, everyone. Now we're going to go to our second roundtable. It will be on the value of integrity. We have this session moderated by Patricia Berba, who is the V20 Task Force lead, and our panelists are going to be Dr. Saad Ibrahim Al-Khalaf, Anat Bardi, Frederick Lehagen, Claudio Radielli, and they're all joining us virtually.
Integrity is an all-time value we need to aspire for globally and in every country around the world. We say aspire because it's in a dynamic and complex world. The consistent and harmonious practice of all human values, which is integrity, calls for an open spirit to embrace new situations while preserving our humanity with timeless principles. While integrity is a basic need for good governance, it requires the strength of human character, starting from leaders, as well as quality policies and infrastructure to facilitate and sustain its practice in all levels of community and organization. We've lived our common history, and we've seen how often integrity is one of the most difficult values to live. We have with us 4 speakers who will share with us some insights from research and experience on respective chapters written under the V20 Integrity Task Force. First of our chapters is entitled Communities of Tomorrow, Building a Values-Based, Children-Friendly Community. Briefly, it's about inclusivity and values-based policymaking, putting importance on the youth sector and future generations. We have Dr. Saad Ibrahim Al-Khalaf. He's the founding partner and vice president of Arawad International Group. He's also the chairman of the Establishing Commission of Arawad University. He has published books such as Values, Philosophy of Interpretation and Methodology of Formation. And he has headed several research teams that carried out several national and regional research studies. So, Dr. Saad, let me ask you this question. Value is something that cannot be easily understood, as we know. So, how can we explain it to our children and the youth?
Thank you, Patricia. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. It's a good question for the beginning. Let's start up with the definition. And you are right, it's not easy for the adult also, not for the children only, or youth. If I will ask you about what your understanding or what your definition about integrity, or ask my colleagues or ask the audience or anyone, everyone, he has his own understanding. And I'm sure most of these understanding is correct because no one definition for the value. And this is common in the social study. The question is how we simplify the value to our children. Actually, the responsibility, I think, it's go on the first for the parents. The parents who would like to raise their children based on the family values or which values they would like to raise them. They should simplify the words by transfer the words from objective to actionable way, and also to link this these value with the children life. One of the researcher's name is David Sosa, said in his book, How the Brain Learn, if we would like to make the information easy for the children or for the adult also, and also easy for remember, it should have 4 criteria. Survival, emotional, has a meaning, and also it makes sense. If the parents, they simplify the values and link it with the children's life with these criteria, I think they will understand it very well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, okay, granted, okay, there's this knowledge imparting about values. So everyone talks about values and their importance, but the question now is, how can we enable our children and the youth to embrace these values?
Actually, this is our target. This is our goal. Actually, it's our purpose to empower the value in the life of the society, and also let's focus on our children and our youth. The question is how. Again, if we will come back to the first question, the first thing, to simplify the words, to take it from the objective side to the actionable side. The second, let me, how many minutes I have? I can talk.
A minute or two.
That. Okay, let's focus on the two important influencers in the life, on the children's life. The parents, they are the first influencer. They should, as I said, transfer the values to the children as an actionable way, by simplifying the values, and also to act. They should be acting what they are believing in these value, because we should remember the children, they don't care what you are saying, but they care what you are do. For that, they should be a model, an idol for the children, if they would like to make them life driven by values. And the second important influencer is the teachers. Also, because the children, when they move from the home to the school, that the second environment for them is the school. And I saw a lot of schools best practice in how they integrate the values with the curriculum, and also how they integrate the values with the school activity, because I think it's not good to give them a lecture or session about the values, but if we will integrate it by the curriculum and the school activity, it will be good. Something else about the local government and the community for our countries, they should do a lot of awareness campaign for the parents and also for the teacher, for the community, how they raise the children and youth based on the country's values. Because the children and the youth, they are the leaders for the future. If you don't care of them now, who will be our leaders in the future?
Thank you so much, Dr. Saad. I myself am an educator, and I feel refreshed hearing this aspiration that you've just shared with us. So anyway, for the public, just to wrap up before we go to the next chapter, we could say, as leaders today and governments look at sustainability and building future-proof communities, it is essential for them to adopt values-based policies that prioritize the current and future needs of the youth and future generations. So thank you. Now I move on to our next chapter.
Thank you.
So it's entitled Globally Encouraging Pro-Environmental Values. So this chapter posits that there is a reciprocal relationship between values and behavior, which has positive implications in the preservation and renewal of our planet. So we have with us Anat Bardi. She's a professor of psychology in Royal Holloway University of London. She's a world-leading expert on values, including how values relate to behavior and how values change. So Anna, how are personal values affected by current actions to mitigate the global environmental crisis?
Thank you, Patricia. So there are already some policies that make people behave in a pro-environmental way, like recycling and like supporting electric vehicles and others. And we know from research that behaving according to a value, not once, but regularly, again and again, strengthens that value. So if we make people behave in a pro-environmental way regularly, they're more likely to later develop pro-environmental values. And these stronger values will lead to even more pro-environmental behaviors. So also ones that are not part of the policies. So this way, the effect is spread more broadly. In addition, here and there are also some value education programs which are meant to increase pro-environmental behavior and values. And these are usually done at schools or in after-school activities. And if they are done well, then they will increase the importance of the natural environment in students, and this will later affect their behavior towards better environmental protection and mitigating mitigating climate change. So there is already good action, but more can be done.
Wow, that's very encouraging. This is a very relevant issue that you're addressing in today's world, right? So just a follow-up question. How can personal values be utilized further to change behavior to mitigate the global environmental crisis then?
So it's not enough for policies to make people behave in a pro-environmental way, because people might object to these policies. People don't like to feel forced. So policies should be accompanied by convincing campaign messages. So how do we make these campaigns convincing? Well, we know from research that campaign messages are more effective if they appeal to people's values. So to increase pro-environmental behavior, campaign messages should appeal to the values of the target population. How do we know which values are important to the target population? Well, we already know this from research. So, for example, we know which cultures value security. We know which cultures value novelty. And we also know how different demographic groups differ in their values. So, for example, how men and women differ in their values, how young people differ from older people in their values, how professionals differ from manual workers in their values. And we can use this. And it is possible to build campaign messages that use arguments based on values of the target population to make the message more convincing. And this will likely result with more pro-environmental behavior of masses of people. Thank you.
Thank you. So this approach really recognizes the uniqueness of approaches necessary for different kinds of people, and it's not something you just impose on them, right? So just in a nutshell, to end this chapter before we move on to the next, so can we say that pro-environmental values prove to be a motivational goal for inspiring people's behavior? And as you have shared through research-grounded policies, messaging, and education. So thank you, Annette. So now let's look at another very interesting chapter. This one is a chapter that presents to us an apparently unappreciated value of nonviolent public demonstrations at grassroots level, being a potential complement to current anti-corruption initiatives. So this one is entitled Building Integrity in People with Nonviolence. So we have Claudio Rodayali, is a professor of comparative public policy at the Florence School of Transnational Governance. He leads on the European Nonviolence Network, funded by the University Association for Contemporary European Studies. So Claudio, how can nonviolence help in building integrity?
Hello, good morning and afternoon. Thank you, Patricia, for this question. In the chapter we wrote together, Roberto Baldoli, my colleague at UCL, and myself, we answer your question in three different ways: at the individual, social, and then more global level. At the individual level, we take lessons from the pandemic and look at how individuals, citizens, have shown capacity for courageous self-suffering and do no harm to others types of behavior, which is essentially the main point about nonviolence. We have seen individuals accepting self-isolation, self-reporting to public authorities, volunteering, assisting others, performing jobs under extreme conditions. And that's the first element, is that citizens are indeed making policy as they go about these self-suffering activities. Then at the social level, we look at research that shows how nonviolence triggers mechanisms that build integrity through trustworthy relationships. We looked at cases of extreme corruption where nevertheless nonviolence being bottom-up and based on people and their understandings can create stable mechanisms to overcome corruption through dignity, self-suffering, and mobilization. Finally, at the planetary level, nonviolence brings the concept of integrity in a bigger idea of what is the do no harm essence of nonviolence. In this case, it's do no harm to the planet, do no harm to other generations. And so it's by taking care of the unity of all, including those who are no longer with us and those who are not born yet, that nonviolence is a bit more philosophical, but overcomes the finite nature of our lives. To act with integrity in this context implies a global, planetary sense of responsibility in which we are all kind of trustees of the living creation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the next question will be, which is probably in the minds of many people in our audience. If people and spontaneous actions are at the roots of nonviolence, what is the role of governments and the scope of public policy?
Excellent. And this is exactly what makes the topic relevant to our session and to the G20 more generally. We argue that governments should act as a kind of sophisticated radar. They should discover, validate, and diffuse lessons of nonviolence applied to governance, lessons that obviously cannot be produced inside a department or a regulatory agency, but are found in society. And the government is the institution that taps into the benefit of knowledge as found at the local level. Obviously, in making policy, it requires a necessary adaptation of institutions and fine-tuning of policies. So the first point is discovery, the second is education, and go back to what we have already said before, and celebration, include nonviolence in schools, educational programs, museums, the public sphere. This kind of institutional recognition of the relevance of nonviolence would enhance the resilience and welfare of society. We cannot take for granted that nonviolence is just there, available at any time, in any place. And thirdly, governments can leverage the potential of nonviolence to create capacity to withstand future attempts at corruption. So the third level is anchoring the potential of nonviolence and locking it in institutional choice and public policy.
Wow. Thank you, Claudia. I never thought that this topic of nonviolence could be so interesting. So if it's fair, if it's fair for me to say, just to wrap up, I hope I give justice to it. So essentially, listening to and even cultivating civic nonviolent expressions offers invaluable perspectives for effective policy design. Okay, so now we move to the last chapter for this roundtable session. I think this chapter is creatively tackling the topic of truth as a commonwealth of humanity. So it's entitled, Truth is a Common and Unifying Good. Now we have with us Frederick Leihagen. He's a practitioner in leadership development, working with leaders to deepen self-awareness to build greater capacity for dealing with complexity. He has 20 years of experience in the global IT industry and now works for Oxford Leadership, supporting executives and teams in large international organizations. He was also a contributor to the V20 last year, 2020, with a chapter on values-based leadership. So, Frederick, Looking at what's going on in the world today, truth seems to be a very challenged idea with different people claiming different truths. What do you mean when you say truth?
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. That's a great question. And as we've seen during the day here, it is indeed a challenged idea. So in this chapter, we wanted to avoid the more philosophical debate about absolute and relative truth. So we have focused on a renewed understanding of the primordial truths. So kind of a truth as a bedrock for contemporary society to realize the common good, which we define as inclusive sustainability, prosperity for our planet. And these primordial truths are incorporated in some of the most well-reflected and well-written international conventions and national government constitutions. So I thought I'd just share three of those that we talk about in the chapter. The first one is about the truth about the dignity of every person. So it's the basis of human rights, the value of inclusion, and the spirit behind justice administered through the law. The second one we talk about is the truth about the common good, of ensuring an all-inclusive development and well-being of people. And the third one we talk about is the truth of the primacy of human development over material or technological advancement as an impetus of today's global thrust on people, the centeredness. So I'll stop there now, Patricia.
Okay, sure. So the next question now has to do with a recommendation in this chapter. No? So it focuses on human capital and integrity development. No? So how does this support truth-telling?
Well, as we mentioned before, and previous speakers alluded to it as well, the world is very complex today. And I would argue it's too complex for a single mind to comprehend. So in addressing our global challenges, we need to tap into our collective wisdom to guide us and our collective intelligence to shape a path forward. And as Aristotle has said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. So our principal recommendation is to incentivize continuous vertical development of leaders, starting with professionals in the fields of influence, such as in government or corporate leaders, lawmakers, educators, etc. And in our recommendation, we emphasize vertical development over the typical horizontal development initiatives, as research shows that vertical development facilitates the evolution of self-awareness and sense-making. It develops systems thinking capabilities and helps leaders to navigate polarities. And very importantly, it also guides leaders on how to role model integrity. And we believe that this development is the foundation for our collective and individual wisdom. And if we can combine that with honoring the primordial truth, we believe we can create a sustainable and inclusive path forward. And just to close with sort of an easy, memorable analogy, we say that truth serves as the bedrock, while values, when lived with integrity, serves as a riverbank to guide decisions towards a common good. Thank you, Patricia.
Well, thanks, Frederick. So at the end of the day, really, recognizing that we share a common truth, I could say it's a pathway to opening up transparent and trust-filled relationships. It's a prerequisite for collaborative solving of deep-rooted global problems. So thank you, everyone. So I guess at this juncture, we can tie things together, today's reflections that you've shared, and probably we can say we get reaffirmed to hear different facets about the value of integrity, all confirming its vital role in building peaceful human relationships between governments and citizens by tapping on the potential of nonviolent civic activities, for example, or we mentioned in the effort to renew our planet through proactive promotion of environmental values, and in creating communities designed to be a welcoming home to today's youth and all generations to come through values-based education and policies. The truth about our common humanity is a powerful unifying factor in our effort to collaborate in developing our shared planet. So again, thank you, Dr. Saad, Anna Bardi, Claudio Radelli, and Frederick Layagan. This is Patricia Verba, and we're hoping our audience to continue to enjoy the rest of the V20 Summit. Thank you.